today, we are going to the back, to the end of medieval times. Welcome to Hrubieszów. It is a town in the southeast Poland with a present population of 18,000, situated only 18 kilometers from the border checkpoint in Zosin and 5 kilometers in a straight line from the border with Ukraine over the Bug River. Hrubieszów is the first name of our town. In 1400, we have been given the city character by the Polish king. He liked deer hunting here. 40 years later, the first Jew came to Hrubieszów. His name was Elijah. Unfortunately, we don't know much about him, just that he used to sell fur and horses in Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. Previously belonged to the crown of the Kingdom of Poland. More news about Jews are from 1456, when the king gives privileges to Michlow for administrating of custom chamber in the town and wine trading in the whole country. He was also exempt from responsibility from all country courts and from paying excess.
5078 is the time when Jews were given more privileges so they become citizens. They had to take on themselves all duties too. They were allowed to build facilities like shops, markets, townhouses and more. They could also conduct many trades. We still have and use Zydzi, a Jewish market. Thanks to this, in the 16th century, Jews started to arrive at Hrubieszów. They built the synagogue. Furthermore, they drew the line of Jewish cemetery, which was several times bigger than it is now, and was used till the end of the World War II, so there were matzevas from a wide range of time.
Unfortunately, the development stopped when Cossacks invaded Hrubieszów, killing Jews and wrecking buildings. The town center was damaged. In the early years of the 18th century, citizens started to rebuild the wrecked town. Then already 51% of houses in Hrubieszów were Jewish. Wooden buildings were replaced by brick houses. In this time, people built inns, and on the place of the old synagogue, the new and bigger one stood. Before the war, Hrubieszów was lively and busy. In the beginning of the 20th century, there were created several cooperatives, credit and loan companies, and saving companies, which Jews or Christians used to conduct creative and economical intellectual town's elite.
There was a huge narrowness in Jewish district, recalls Professor Zyn, famous Polish architect born in Hrubieszów. Houses were crowding. They were standing not only one by one, but even one on one. Trees and flowers were rareness in this place. It was like that because between buildings and muddy gloughs there just wasn't any space for green in every form. Despite strange or even scary atmosphere for us, we haven't heard about any thefts and fights in this area. Fishermen, rope makers and soap makers lived in Wodna Street. Those first stored their articles in boxes in Hrubieshowa River. These underwater safes for fish, which were chained to thick pails, were thought really craftily. There were partitions inside them, so crucian carps didn't have to be aware of Pike's neighborhood. On market day, alive fish were getting out of boxes and were moving in tin dishes on stalls. Fishermen boasted about fish's freshness and delicious taste. Soap makers were the most burdensome for the surrounding. There were few basements in Wodna Street. Inside them, blackened ovens stood. Exactly here, Jews were smelting fat, which was needed to soap making. Stinking dust and fat smell always flew under the street full of mud and dirt. Despite that, people had to live here. They used to be born and die in this place, probably even without awareness about existing on another world. Before the beginning of the Second World War, in our provincial architecture, some indeterminate style of Jewish buildings existed. Once it was surely more visible, but when Jews were gradually assimilating, the individual architectonic style started dying down. Near the footbridges, there were standing houses without any gardens. In the twilight, their shapes with steep, bent roofs locked severally on the purple sky. It was quiet and solemn. Shames, servant of synagogue, walked on empty street among the red dust. He came to all of houses and knocked the doors with his bent stick. 2 short, nervous knocks and 1 long, not abolishing opposition. Shames reminded about time, when Sabbath had to start. On Saturday morning, synagogue servant will walk the street of Jewish town once again to shout with his singing voice, "Steht's auf," what means get up, it's time for prayer. But it is going to happen tomorrow. Landrail birds sounded on meadow. The sky becomes more red. Before the sun went down under the horizon, in Jewish houses' windows, shutters had been closed and Sabbath candles had been lighted. Their faint flames were flaring only in non-covered windows of the attics. The 7th Jewish day of rest started on Friday evening. By few moments, washed up and wearing long overalls, Jews will go out from all of the buildings. Each of them is going to walk to the house of the prayer or synagogue. Each of them is going to carry under an armpit a velvet bag full of accessories, which are necessary to praise God. They are going to walk slowly and nobly, how it is assigned to Israelites. And then they are going to come back home to eat Sabbath supper.
Jews dominated on commercial stage. Jewish businessmen conducted industrial plants and owned the biggest part of shops and craft business. 3 photographic studios functioned in the town and all were Jewish. When Christians founded first studio, they included information that it's Christian studio. The biggest business in Hrubieszów was a tobacco factory owned by Hershek Kania. Also there functioned the factory of machines and farm tools owned by Albert Singernot, and the boiler plant. Significant income for Jewish people were leases of places, baths, slaughterhouses and mills. They drew income also from owned estates and transport services. The Jews lived among us and they built with us the culture of our town. To this day, people recall the Jewish presence as neighbors, business competitors, and friends. Everybody builds their views based on lived experiences.
Professor Zin, in his work By Whisper and Silence, cordially recalls Mr. Shoel Eisen.
On the left, our neighbor was Shoel Eisen, an extraordinary man. He was neither a merchant nor a loan shark. He dedicated his all-hesitated money to buy some land, a small possession in nearby Świerszów. He grew up wheat and sugar beets there. He lived comfortably and was called a landlord. Eisen must have been a romantic Jew, because after becoming rich he bought a land in the town and built a house, but in a strange way. Not at the street, but on the bank of the river. My grandpa advised him not to do it, because of frogs, dampness and mosquitoes. Eisen nodded, but he didn't change his decision. "Mister, he said, want to have a bit of Venice at home." Grandma Helena also told me about Mr. Scholl as a very nice man who employed her whole family. Unfortunately, he was killed by SS at the cemetery. Mrs. Helena, being grateful to his memory, brought bread to the ghetto.
Mr. Stanisław Pryl writes about rather his rival at work. My father and I founded Cinema Rusałka in 1920. Hrubieszów didn't have electricity then, and he used our own electric power generator. Another cinema belonged to the Jew, Manikow. The 2 cinemas were competing. But after building social house, Manikow stopped his business and sold his equipment to this new institution.
In Hrubieszów, there were born many interesting and significant people, like Henry Orenstein. He was born in 1923 in our little town. This person is well known in the USA and other countries all over the world as a great poker player, author of many books, philanthropist, and the creator of Transformers. Henrik Orenstein spent most of World War II in 5 different concentration camps. Orenstein emigrated to the United States in 1947 and there gained popularity. He also wrote a book about himself, I Shall Live, Surviving Against All Odds, 1939-1945. Introducing persons we can't miss. Mr. Meyer Magdal. He was born in 1926 and he was 13 when the World War II broke out. In 1933, before the outbreak of World War II, my father owned a soft drink manufacturing and distributing business. He was also a partner in a wine and liquor business with my uncle Azriel. My family's social and financial status I would consider to have been in the upper middle class, judging by the community standards. There were many Jews in our town that lived poverty, and they were helped by the more fortunate ones. I remember that the town merchants established a Bethlehem, house of bread, the main purpose of which was to find out which of Jewish families in the town were the needy ones, and distribute challah to them each Friday for the Sabbath meal. The recipients were kept in confidence. My father was a vice president and one of the founders of the organization. My family's relationship and contact with non-Jews, as far as I recall, was predominantly limited to business. In September 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland and the fate of European Jewry became sealed. The morning of September 1st, 1939 was also a memorable one. After many tension-filled days came the announcement over the radio that Germany had attacked Poland with an overwhelming military force. The Germans occupied our town on September 14th and began looting most businesses. Our wine and liquor store was one of the first they cleaned out. They arrived with 2 trucks and confiscated all the merchandise, but did not physically harm anyone in our family.
One of first changes we experienced under German administration was the lack of access to public schools for Jewish children. Even though we youngsters were barred from public schools, our education opportunities didn't cease entirely. Some Zionist leaders formed underground groups and in an informal manner offered instruction in a variety of subjects to those who desired it. A young man, a former leader of Hashomer Hatzair Yahuv group, used to come to our house to teach. He tried to give us hope to survive and a longing for a homeland in Eretz Israel. However, these informal meetings soon became too risky to continue. The German authorities began issuing numerous edicts aimed specifically at the Jewish population and intended to curb and limit our daily freedoms. We were ordered to select a Judenrat, a group of elders to act as intermediaries between us and the German authorities. On December 1st, 1939, we were informed by the Judenrat that the German authorities ordered all Jew men aged from 16 to 60 to appear at a specific time in a designated place in our town. There were rumors that a resettlement might take place and that death penalty would await anyone ignoring the order. So the following morning, my father and about 2,000 others at that age group appeared as ordered.
They marched with Jews from home, surrounded by SS. When they arrived, the Russian turned them back, firing at them. Not many of them survived.
During the summer 1940, we were ordered to move into grandparents' apartment located in the Jewish quarter.
In the newspaper, Ruth Tatarko tells her history.
Regina runs to the basement. Her dad Motul, Hadjas, a wealthy Jew, digs a hole and puts there a capsule. We are hiding our precious things so the Germans cannot take them, interprets the father. Regina came back quickly with her cute doll, after all the most precious. She pushes it among jewelry and coins. The father doesn't want the doll. It's too big. You need someone to whom you will share your stories. When the World War II broke out, the girl was brought up by a teacher's family Hrubieszowscy. She lived in their house. I didn't look like a Jewess. No one knew in school. Blue-eyed. I looked like a Polish girl. They didn't even hide me. Once when Regina escaped to home, there was already nobody. Silence and void, the district got extinct. She overheard the Germans talking, so she discovered they were in the ghetto. It started to be dangerous. Even she had to hide. Once she didn't obey the guardians, who warned her not to go to the town center on her own. She went to Jodkowa Street, where the ghetto was, and found out that her family isn't alive. She's alone with her doll.
In Hrubieszów, there was also such a camp. In 1943, it was definitely cleared out, but it wasn't a true camp. They just created a ghetto in this town and surrounded and didn't allow anyone to get into. In the beginning, people could more freely, but later they were prohibited. Sometimes it was possible to take somebody out from the ghetto. It was such a way to rescue Jews. Especially children and youngsters were rescued and hidden. It wasn't easy there because the area was administered by Ukrainian authorities and police. According to the situation, Polish people had to be very careful because of the German soldiers and their Ukrainian collaborators, of course. There was also bad and good Ukrainians as well as Poles. However, Ukrainian administration and police declared to help German.
We must recall about those who saved Jews in World War II and have been given the prize of righteous among the nations.
I came to Jodkowa Street, where I lived in the past. I searched some eyewitness from who I could hear what happened here. I met a man named Hapoński. Mr. Hapoński saved a Jews. We saw the main hall through, which he showed a 19-year-old girl to hide out. Her name was Hadja Papier. This girl received fake Aryan documents and she survived. She lived in Australia. He did it also. The Gestapo outpost was in the neighboring house. For this hero act, we asked Yad Vashem to admit Mr. Hapoński as righteous among the nations and invite to Israel. During the war, the cemetery area was a place of mass executions of the Jewish community, and the Jewish tombstones were used by the Germans to harden the roads and squares. The tombstones that were still left were taken after the war by some people with the purpose of using them as a building materials. There remained only several Jewish tombstones and pieces of destroyed headstones at the cemetery area by the end of 1980s. The secretary, Mr. Shalom Omri, and the Landsmannschaft decided to do something to renovate the Jewish cemetery in Hrubieszów. The person who decided to undertake that activity was the then mayor of the town, Kazimierz Lukiewicz. His cooperation with the Hrubieszów youth and the support of local bodies of opinion led him to find many preserved Jewish tombstones which originally came from the cemetery. Using left tombstones and founded pieces, Professor Zinn and Abraham Silberstein designed a memory wall. What is more, the cemetery has also a marble monument erected on the nativate of Abraham Sher. The inscription says, "In memory of Jews, Holocaust victims, 1939-1945. Shalom Omri was in Hrubieszów many times. Thanks to him, the cooperation between Yav from Holland, where Shalom lives, and our school in Hrubieszów.
Beautiful is this collaboration because beautiful is peace, says Shalom Omri, and the holy memory of the tragedy, but also the time when Jews and Polish were neighbors, customers, friends. Together they lived from hand to mouth, but could share even with the last penny. This recollection need Jewish-Polish meetings. After Professor Zinn's death, Omri memorialized the great architect by planting 18 olive trees on Jerusalem hill and road. For evidence of memory, Professor Zinn, beloved and magnificent man, one of the most distinguished Polish artists. I'm ready to turn back to my shtetl every day, says Shalom Omri. And when he come here, he stands up early, He hangs his bag on the arm and takes a walk at Hrubieszów streets. He looks into alleys and mutter. Ach, Hrubieszów, you are my first love.
We are brother and sisters. With the common past, our history made us who we are, and we should not forget it. 3 years we lived side by side, respecting each other's. Also now, we are linked.